Fiscal deficit is the difference between your income and expenditure. Expenditure is more, so therefore that difference is the fiscal deficit. I have to finance that deficit by borrowing from the market, and I must borrow only that much which I can repay. So therefore fiscal deficit becomes very important. So government obviously go on borrowing because it has to be repaid.
Absolutely.
And we should not also create a situation where the entire income gets diverted for, if not the entire income, but a large portion of the entire income of the government, the revenue of the government should not get diverted to repay loans, because repay these borrowings. Yes. Then you are left with nothing to run the government and to continue the development works. Right. So that way fiscal deficit is very important, because we finance it by borrowing and we have to repay, and the borrowing therefore has to be kept to the limit of my repayment capacity. Expenditures are important because government has to implement development schemes. Government has to see that the development works and the growth arises because of government expenditure. At the same time, as I mentioned, what is important is my borrowing capability. Yes. So therefore, what is very important is that you have to find a balance. The balance has to be found between your expenditure requirements, what are the critical components where you need to spend money, and on the other hand, how much I can borrow so that I am able to repay. So based on that, there are two schools of thought. There are people who say that you should not worry about borrowing. You should just, spending is something on which you must give entire focus and not worry about the fiscal deficit. There is another school of thought which says that you should be maintaining fiscal deficit very tightly, otherwise repayment capacity is affected. Now I think the truth generally lies somewhere in the middle, and usually government does a very balancing act, because government is in a position to know what is important for how much of expenditure it can afford and how much of borrowing it can afford. The world economy today is experiencing the kind of volatility and uncertainty which we never saw earlier.
Yes.
There was a time when we used to say that what is going to happen next week in Europe or in some part of the world, we do not know. But today we have come to a position where we do not know what's going to happen the very next day in which part of the world. Yes. Unexpectedly, markets are some European markets or external markets, the stock markets or other markets are crashing. Suddenly you find that a particular currency is depreciating. Yes. Now we live in a global village, so therefore whatever happens in any part of the world affects us, because India over the last several years is getting increasingly globalized. So therefore there is uncertainty, there is volatility all around. I think amidst all these problems, amidst when we are in a sea that is in turbulence, I think India is remaining afloat, and not only remaining afloat. This year, as the statisticians, as the Central Statistics Organization has already given out, we are expecting a growth of 7.6%, yes. which can be considered as very good, given the circumstances. We were used to about 8 or 9% growth earlier, but given the kind of problem which the world is encountering, I think a 7.6% growth is very, very significant. Large number of recommendations and proposals come from, in fact, we invite suggestions through the Twitter account, through the email. We also get large number of we get a lot of recommendations, lot of suggestions. I would say half these proposals, or maybe 60% of these proposals, have the same proposals which keep coming year after year.
Okay.
So we keep evaluating them, because the situation changes. Just because we did not accept something last year, it doesn't mean that we will not look at it this year, because the situation is changing. Last year we could not do something because the situation was different. So even if it's an old suggestion, we know what the suggestion is, we have all the details, so a fresh view is taken whether it can be done. With regard to the new suggestions which come, there are again two parts. Some of them are purely procedural, administrative, which can be done at any time of the year and really do not relate to the budget process. So then we take out what really relates to the budget process, and then we have time, we have dedicated teams for examining these proposals. For example, the Revenue Department have two wings to examine all the direct and indirect tax proposals. In the expenditure side also, the Department of Expenditure and the Department of Economic Affairs together we hold consultations and discussions with the concerned secretaries, and then put some proposal before the government in a manner with a specific recommendation that this proposal can be accepted with these modifications or no modifications, and this proposal cannot be accepted for these reasons.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.